My name is Elena Whitmore, and this is the story of how I finally chose myself after 21 years of pouring everything into a marriage that was never built to last. The afternoon it all ended, the Texas heat pressed heavy against the windows of our home in North Dallas. I had come back early from the twins' pediatric checkup, the diaper bag still slung over my shoulder, both 3-month-old babies sleeping peacefully in their carriers. The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me like a slap I didn't see coming, sweet vanilla and jasmine perfume, thick and foreign, wrapping around my kitchen like it already owned the place. There she was. A young blonde woman, no older than 24, standing barefoot near the marble island wearing my cream cashmere robe, the one my mother had given me the Christmas before she passed. One hand rested dramatically over her pregnant belly while she sipped sparkling water from my favorite crystal glass, the one I only used on special occasions. Upstairs, dresser drawers slammed shut, then Ethan appeared at the top of the staircase, carrying 2 matching designer suitcases. For a second my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The twins started fussing softly beside me. Sweat clung to the back of my neck even though the air conditioning was blasting cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. She smiled first, calm, almost gentle. "Oh, you're home earlier than Ethan expected." Those words still make my stomach turn when I remember them, like I was the intruder in my own house. Ethan came down the stairs slowly, adjusting the cuff of his crisp white shirt as if this were just another business conversation. "She's staying here for a while, Elena," he said, his voice flat, almost bored. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the soft cries of our babies. Then he delivered the sentence that shattered 21 years of marriage in a single breath. "She's pregnant with my baby, we're going to need space." My fingers tightened around the handles of the carriers until my knuckles turned white. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there in the kitchen I had designed while pregnant at 47, the kitchen Ethan said he wanted for one last fresh start for our family. Turns out that fresh start didn't include me. If you've ever been erased in your own home, you know that strange, cold numbness that spreads through your chest. Not just heartbreak, something deeper. The quiet realization that the person you built a life with had already emotionally checked out long ago. Ethan walked toward the counter and tossed a set of keys beside me. "You can take the Lexus. Sophia needs the Escalade now." The keys scraped across the marble with a sharp metallic sound that cut through the air. He actually expected me to nod, pack quietly, and disappear because he believed I had nowhere else to go. After all, he loved to remind me that my father had abandoned me 20 years ago. That was his first mistake. I carried the twins upstairs without another word. My hands moved on autopilot, diapers, bottles, soft blankets, extra formula. The nursery still smelled like warm baby lotion, and the faint lavender diffuser I kept running for the babies. Downstairs I could hear her faint laugh at something Ethan said. That sound followed me like a shadow while I zipped the diaper bag shut. When I came back down carrying both carriers, Ethan looked visibly relieved. He thought this was the end, that I would leave quietly like a good, obedient wife who had no other options. But outside, something was happening. The low, powerful rumble of engines rolled through our quiet neighborhood. 3 identical black Rolls-Royce Phantoms turned slowly into our long driveway, moving with the kind of quiet authority that made the whole street seem to hold its breath. Almost simultaneously, the distant but unmistakable roar of a private Gulfstream jet could be heard approaching the small executive airfield just 2 miles away. Ethan's face lost every drop of color. The suitcase he was still holding for Sophia slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Sophia's confident smile faltered for the first time. The lead driver, a dignified older man who had served my family for decades, approached the front door and spoke with quiet respect. "Mrs. Whitmore, your father has been waiting for you." And then Richard Whitmore, my father, stepped out of the center Rolls-Royce, cowboy boots, tailored gray sport coat, that calm, unshakable presence that had built an empire from Texas soil. His eyes moved from me holding our twins to Sophia still wearing my mother's robe, and finally settled on Ethan. A long silence filled the air. My father adjusted one cuff and spoke in the calmest, most terrifying voice imaginable. "Son, you just made the worst calculation of your life. Hey friends, if you're watching this right now, and you've ever felt small in your own story, stay with me. Because this is only the beginning. The moment everything I thought I knew about my marriage came crashing down, and the moment I started becoming the woman I was always meant to be." Type the word strength in the comments if you've ever had to find your power when someone tried to take everything from you. I see you. You're not alone in this. I stood there in the foyer for what felt like an eternity, the weight of both carriers pulling at my shoulders, while Ethan stared at my father like he'd seen a ghost. The man who had just told me to serve his pregnant mistress suddenly looked smaller, younger, and completely out of his depth. That image is burned into my memory. Ethan Cole, the confident executive who always had an answer for everything, frozen in our own doorway as the reality of whose daughter he had betrayed finally sank in. I didn't wait for more words. I simply turned, walked past Sophia, who was now clutching the robe tighter around herself, and headed back toward the nursery. My hands moved with surprising steadiness as I finished gathering the essentials. Diapers, bottles already warmed in the warmer, the soft blue blanket my grandmother had knitted for the twins, and the tiny stuffed lamb that helped them settle at night. Every item I placed in the bag felt like another page of our old life being closed. If you've ever had to pack your babies and leave the only home you've known for 21 years in under 20 minutes, you understand the strange calm that settles over you. It's not peace. It's shock protecting your heart from breaking all at once. While I folded the last blanket, I made the call, one single quiet phone call to the only person I knew would answer without asking 100 questions. My voice stayed steady as I spoke. "Dad, I need you." That was all. No tears, no long explanation. He simply said, "I'm already on the way," and hung up. In that moment, I realized he had probably been waiting for this call for years. Downstairs, the atmosphere had grown thick with tension. I could hear Ethan's voice rising slightly as he tried to regain control, explaining something to my father about misunderstandings and temporary situations. Sophia stayed silent, her earlier confidence completely gone. She avoided looking at me when I came back down carrying both twins. Ethan turned toward me one last time. "Elena, you don't have to do this. We can figure something out." His tone had shifted from commanding to almost pleading, but it was too late. The words he had spoken earlier, "serve her or get out," still echoed in my ears like a door slamming shut on 2 decades of my life. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I saw the man clearly. Not the ambitious husband I had supported through every setback, but someone who had quietly built a separate future while I was busy raising our children and designing the life we were supposed to share. "You made your choice, Ethan," I said softly. "Now I'm making mine." The drive to my father's ranch outside Fort Worth felt surreal. I sat in the back of the center Rolls-Royce with the twins secured safely beside me. My father rode across from me, hands folded loosely in his lap, staring out at the passing Texas landscape. He didn't press me for details. He never did. That quiet strength was something I had forgotten after 20 years away. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and golds behind the mesquite trees. One of the twins stirred and let out a small cry. Without a word, my father reached over and gently adjusted the blanket around her. In that simple gesture, 20 years of distance between us began to feel a little smaller. As we drove through the familiar iron gates of the Whitmore Ranch, the limestone house came into view, warm lights glowing from the windows. The smell of cedar and fresh coffee greeted us as we stepped inside. Elena, our longtime housekeeper, met me at the door. She took one look at the twins and me and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart, you're home." That kindness nearly broke me more than Ethan's betrayal. Not the anger or the humiliation, but the simple, unconditional welcome that reminded me I still had a place in this world. Later that night, after the twins were settled in the nursery my father had somehow prepared in advance, I sat on the edge of the bed in the room that used to be mine as a girl. The same oak dresser, the same quilt. A single tear finally slipped down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. I thought about the woman I had been that morning, still trying to hold together a marriage that was already broken, and the woman I was becoming now. Someone who was done shrinking herself to fit into someone else's story. Hey friends, if you've ever stayed too long in a situation that was quietly destroying you, I want you to hear this. The moment you decide to choose yourself is terrifying, but it's also the moment you start breathing again. Type "I'm choosing me" in the comments if this part of the story hits close to home. You're stronger than you think. And the best part of your story? It's still being written. The Whitmore Ranch had changed very little in the 21 years since I'd last lived there. White fences still stretched across the rolling hills, horses moved slowly in the west pasture under the fading Texas sky, and the big limestone house stood solid and steady like it had been waiting for me all along. I stepped inside carrying one of the twins while my father took the other. The familiar scent of cedar wood and fresh coffee wrapped around me like an old embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, my shoulders began to relax just a fraction. Elena, our housekeeper who had been with the family since I was a teenager, touched my arm gently. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her eyes softening as she looked at the babies, "you must be exhausted." Those simple words of kindness nearly undid me. Not Ethan's cold command in the kitchen, not the sight of Sophia in my robe, but this genuine warmth that reminded me I was still someone's daughter, still worthy of care. My father waved off the staff who had come out to help. "Give her space," he said quietly. He led me upstairs to the nursery he had somehow prepared in record time. Two bassinets sat near the tall windows overlooking the pasture, fresh blankets, sterilized bottles, and formula lined up neatly on the counter. I turned to him, surprised. "You planned for this?" I asked softly. He looked at me for a long moment, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. "I hoped I wouldn't need to," he replied. That was all. No lectures about how he had warned me about Ethan all those years ago, just quiet acceptance. That night, sleep came in fragments. Around 2 a.m, soft crying drifted through the baby monitor. My body ached with exhaustion, but I forced myself up and padded down the hallway. Halfway to the nursery, I stopped in the doorway. There was my father, Richard Whitmore, the man who could close billion-dollar land deals before breakfast, sitting in the old rocking chair, holding my son awkwardly against his broad chest. He stared down at the baby bottle like it was some complicated contract. The baby had spit up on his expensive shirt, but he didn't seem to mind. A quiet laugh escaped me, the first real one in days. "You're holding him a little too low," I said gently, walking over to adjust the baby's position against his shoulder. My father watched carefully, trying to memorize the movement. "You used to do this with me?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Moonlight spilled across the hardwood floor. "Every night after your mother passed," he said softly. "You were colicky, screamed for hours. I'd walk these same halls with you until sunrise." That small memory hit me harder than I expected. Not the powerful businessman, but a widowed father doing his best. I hadn't let myself think about those years in a long time. We sat together in comfortable silence as the baby finally settled. In that quiet nursery, 20 years of distance between us started to melt away. I realized then how much I had missed this, not the money or the luxury, but the steady, unshakable presence of someone who loved me without conditions. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon drifting up from the kitchen. Sunlight poured through the windows, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely shattered. Downstairs, lawyers had already arrived. Papers covered the long dining table. My father stood by the windows with a cup of coffee, listening as one of the attorneys explained what they had found. But that's a story for later. Hey friends, if you've ever been away from home for so long that you forgot what real safety feels like, I want you to know something important. Sometimes the place you ran from as a young woman becomes the exact place that helps you rebuild when life breaks you. Type the word home in the comments if this part resonates with you, whether it's a physical place or simply the people who never stopped believing in you. That morning on the ranch, as I watched my father awkwardly burp my son again, I felt the first real shift inside me. From a woman who had been erased in her own marriage to someone who was slowly remembering who she was, before she tried to prove everyone wrong by marrying Ethan Cole. The healing didn't happen overnight, but it started right there, in the quiet moments between midnight feedings and strong cups of coffee, surrounded by the land that had raised me. The days that followed at the ranch blurred together in a rhythm of feedings, quiet conversations, and the steady presence of lawyers who arrived each morning like clockwork. I would sit at the long oak dining table with a cup of coffee warming my hands while documents spread out before me like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. One of the lead attorneys, a sharp woman named Margaret, who had worked with my father for over 15 years, slid a thick folder toward me. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently, "we've uncovered several financial irregularities tied to your husband's business activities." Irregularities. That word sounded too clean for what it actually meant. As I flipped through the pages, my stomach tightened with every line. Forged signatures on loan applications. My signature, apparently, though I had never seen these documents. Shell companies registered in my name without my knowledge. Crypto transfers moving money into accounts I didn't even know existed. Ethan had been leveraging the Whitmore family name as collateral, assuming that if things ever collapsed, my father's empire would quietly cover the debts to protect me. He had been playing a long game, using my trust, my family's reputation, and even our marriage as a safety net while building something entirely separate with Sophia. I sat there in silence, the morning light streaming through the tall windows onto the papers. Outside, horses grazed peacefully in the pasture, completely unaware of the storm unfolding inside. I thought about all the times Ethan had complained about financial pressure while we lived in a 7,000 square foot home, drove luxury cars, and sent our older children to the best private schools. I had believed it was ambition. Turns out it was desperation wrapped in expensive suits and rented Rolexes. If you've ever discovered that the person you trusted most was quietly dismantling your future behind your back, you know how disorienting it feels. It's not just anger, it's a deep, bone-tired sadness for the version of yourself who kept believing. My father stood near the window, listening without interrupting. When Margaret mentioned how Ethan had also been pursuing supply contracts through Whitmore businesses, my father finally spoke. He didn't just betray you, Elena. He tried to use this family as his personal ATM. His voice stayed calm, but I heard the steel underneath. That afternoon, more pieces fell into place. Ethan hadn't just brought Sophia into our home because he loved her. She was useful, young, impressionable, and connected in ways that could help him climb higher. He had told her I was cold and manipulative, obsessed with family money. He had painted me as the villain so perfectly that she believed it until the cracks started showing. I excused myself after the lawyers left and walked out to the back porch. The Texas wind moved through the oak trees as I sat on the wooden swing, watching the sun dip lower. 21 years. I had stood by him through 2 failed startups, health scares, and every late night at the office. And in return, he had forged my name and planned a future that didn't include me or our twins. But here's what surprised me most. The more I learned, the less I felt like a victim. Instead, I felt clarity. Cold, steady clarity. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated betrayal built on lies, greed, and the assumption that I would always stay small and quiet. Hey friends, if you're going through something similar right now, if someone you loved has been hiding who they really are, I want you to remember this. Knowledge is power. Even when it hurts like hell, seeing the full truth is the first step toward taking your life back. Type the word truth in the comments if this part is hitting you hard. You deserve honesty even when it's painful, and you are stronger than the lies they told you. By the time evening settled over the ranch, I felt a quiet shift inside me. The woman who had been erased in her own kitchen was slowly waking up, and she wasn't going to stay silent much longer. A few nights later, my phone lit up on the nightstand with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me open the message. Please don't block me, it's Sophia. He lied to both of us. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time, the soft glow illuminating the dark bedroom. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the one that was tired of living in half-truths, knew I needed to hear what she had to say. We arranged to meet the next evening at a quiet steakhouse downtown. Rain had finally broken the brutal heat wave, and water streaked down the tall windows as I walked in. Sophia sat in a back corner booth, wearing a simple cream sweater, her face bare of the heavy makeup she'd worn in my kitchen. Without the confident pose and designer robe, she looked younger, exhausted, and surprisingly human. She stood awkwardly when she saw me. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. We ordered water and barely touched the menus. Soft country music played overhead while thunder rumbled outside. For the first few minutes, neither of us knew quite where to start. "He told me you were cold," she finally admitted, "manipulative, obsessed with your family's money, that your marriage had been over for years and you treated him like staff." She looked down at her hands. I believed him at first. A bitter smile crossed my face. Staff, the man who hadn't packed his own suitcase in 20 years. I listened as she told me how Ethan had painted grand pictures of their future, once the divorce was final, once he gained full control of certain deals. He talked constantly about big money, connections, land contracts through the Whitmore network. He made her feel special, chosen. Until the cracks appeared. He kept saying rich people stay rich by hiding money where nobody can trace it, she continued quietly. Then she reached into her bag and slid a worn black leather notebook across the table. My fingers felt cold as I opened it. Pages of account numbers, crypto wallets, wire transfers, shell companies. Some of the entries were in my name, others in hers. "He got drunk one night and bragged about how smart he was," Sophia said. Her eyes filling with tears, she quickly blinked away. "I helped him move some of it because I thought we were building something together. I was useful to him, Elena. Not loved. Just useful." The weight of those words settled between us. She wasn't innocent, she admitted that, but she had also been manipulated by the same man who had erased me in our own home. We sat there while the rain hammered harder against the glass, 2 women who had been sold different versions of the same lie. If you've ever sat across from the other woman and realized she was just another casualty of the same game, you understand how complicated betrayal can be. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it does make the picture clearer. Sophia leaned in. Debt collectors started calling last month. He owes far more than he ever let on. He even tried to get supply contracts through your father's company using my name. Her face hardened. I wasn't the love of his life. I was the next stepping stone. We barely ate the steaks that arrived. Instead, we talked not as enemies, but as two people piecing together the same broken puzzle. By the time we left the restaurant, something important had shifted inside me. The humiliation felt smaller. The anger was still there, but it had direction now. Hey friends, if you've ever been caught in someone else's web of lies, I want you to hear this. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. And when it does, it doesn't just hurt, it frees you. Type the word clarity in the comments if this part of the story is helping you see your own situation differently. You're not crazy, you're not alone. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living in the dark. Driving back to the ranch that night through the rain, I felt the first real spark of strategy forming. Not revenge in the loud, dramatic sense, but something quieter, smarter. The kind of response that comes from a woman who is finally done being underestimated. The days after my meeting with Sophia became a quiet blur of strategy and inner work. I spent mornings on the back porch with my father, watching the sun rise over the pastures while the twins napped nearby. We didn't rush into anger or dramatic plans. Instead, we built something more powerful: preparation. My father never pushed. He simply listened as I laid out everything I had learned from the lawyers and from Sophia's notebook. He assumed you would stay quiet because you always had, he said one morning over coffee. That assumption is his greatest weakness. We worked with a small, trusted team. Margaret and her legal group dug deeper into the financial trails. They found more, not just forged signatures on loans, but communications where Ethan had used my name to approach investors, promising Whitmore backing that never existed. He had been building a house of cards on my family's reputation, while telling Sophia I was the obstacle to their perfect life. In the quiet hours, I began to rebuild myself too. I started therapy sessions over video with a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma. Some days I would walk the ranch trails pushing the double stroller, letting the Texas wind clear my head. I thought about the woman I had been, always accommodating, always trying to make things work, always believing that love meant sacrificing myself until nothing was left. That version of me was changing. One evening, as golden light stretched across the fields, my father and I sat on the porch swing. The Whitmore Foundation Gala is next Saturday, he said calmly. Ethan already confirmed his attendance weeks ago. He's planning to bring her. I felt my chest tighten, but this time it wasn't fear, it was resolve. Good, I replied, I'll be there too. We didn't plan a shouting match or public scene. That wasn't our way. Instead, we prepared with precision. The team compiled clear, undeniable evidence, side-by-side signature comparisons, transaction records, emails, and statements from Sophia that she had agreed to share. My father made quiet calls to key board members and investors who needed to know the truth before they committed more money. Meanwhile, I focused on my own strength. I chose the dress carefully, an ivory silk gown that felt like armor, with my grandmother's diamond and sapphire brooch pinned near the shoulder. Every Whitmore woman had worn it at important moments. It wasn't about showing off wealth, it was about remembering who I was. If you've ever had to prepare in silence while the world thought you were broken, you know how empowering it feels. It's not loud revenge. It's the deep, steady power of a woman who has decided her worth no longer depends on someone else's opinion. I spent time with the twins every day, feeding them, rocking them, whispering promises that their mother would never shrink herself again. In those small, ordinary moments, my healing deepened. I realized I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting to become the mother, the daughter, and the woman I had put on hold for 21 years. Hey friends, if you're in the middle of your own quiet preparation right now, gathering your strength, your evidence, your courage, I want you to know you're doing it right. The most powerful comebacks often begin in silence. Type the word prepare in the comments if you're currently building your own strategy in the shadows. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the calmest voices carry the most weight. By the night before the gala, I felt ready, not excited, not vengeful, just clear. The woman who had stood frozen in her kitchen, holding 2 babies, while being told to serve her husband's mistress, was gone. In her place was someone who understood her value and was finally ready to protect it. The night of the Whitmore Foundation Gala arrived with a quiet kind of electricity in the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas. Women in elegant gowns and men in tailored tuxedos moved through the ballroom like they owned the world, because many of them did. Soft jazz played from a live trio while the scent of fresh roses and expensive champagne drifted through the room. I arrived with my father in one of the black Rolls-Royces. When the valet opened my door, the cool evening air brushed against my skin. I stepped out in the ivory silk gown, my grandmother's diamond and sapphire brooch, catching the light near my shoulder. It wasn't flashy. It was a quiet statement, a reminder of the women who came before me and the strength I carried now. My father offered his arm. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady. I nodded. "Yes, let's do this." As we walked through the lobby, heads turned. People in Dallas society have long memories. They remembered the Whitmore daughter who walked away from the family for love 21 years ago. And in the past few weeks, they had heard the whispers online, the carefully planted stories about my supposed postpartum breakdown. Ethan had been busy trying to rewrite the narrative. Inside the ballroom, nearly 400 guests filled the space, and there he was. Ethan stood near the center bar, laughing a little too loudly with a group of investors. Sophia was beside him in a dark green gown that accentuated her pregnancy. His hand rested possessively on her lower back. The moment his eyes found mine across the room, his smile froze, the color drained from his face. Sophia's hand tightened on her glass. Conversations around them began to slow as people sensed the shift. Wealthy rooms are good at pretending not to gossip, but everyone noticed. Ethan recovered first, smoothing his expression into that polished executive mask he wore so well. He walked toward us with Sophia trailing slightly behind. "Elena," he said carefully, keeping his voice low, "I didn't expect to see you here." I met his gaze calmly. "You rarely do." His eyes flicked to the brooch on my shoulder, then to my father standing tall beside me. For the first time in our marriage, Ethan looked genuinely unsure. He tried to regain control. "My lawyers advised me not to discuss private matters tonight." My father gave a small nod. "Smartest thing they've told you all year." A few nearby guests pretended very hard to be fascinated by their drinks. The tension was thick enough to cut. Sophia shifted uncomfortably beside him, her earlier confidence replaced by visible nervousness. She looked pale under the warm lighting. A charity board member approached to announce that dinner service would begin shortly. Ethan seized the interruption. "Enjoy the evening," he muttered, guiding Sophia away. But I noticed the slight tremble in his hand against her back. 40 minutes later, the lights dimmed as the foundation presentation began. My father and I sat at the head table. Across the ballroom, Ethan kept glancing our way, his jaw tight. He knew something was coming, he just didn't know how big it would be. The foundation director introduced my father first. Polite applause followed as Richard Whitmore stepped onto the stage with his usual quiet authority. He spoke briefly about supporting families across Texas. Then he paused, looked directly toward me, and nodded once. That was my cue. My heart beat steady as I rose from my chair. Heels clicked softly against the marble steps leading to the stage. Nearly 400 people watched in complete silence. Ethan straightened in his seat. Sophia closed her eyes briefly. I took the microphone. For one long second, the ballroom held its breath. Hey friends, if you've ever had to stand up in a room full of people who once watched you shrink yourself, you know how powerful that moment feels. Not because you want to destroy someone, but because you finally refuse to disappear. I smiled faintly and began. My husband taught me something important this year. My husband taught me something important this year, I said into the microphone, my voice calm and steady. Never love someone more than you love yourself. The ballroom was completely silent. Not a single glass clinked. 400 people hung on every word. Behind me, the large projection screens flickered to life. Side-by-side documents appeared, forged signatures, loan applications in my name that I had never seen, wire transfers to shell companies, crypto accounts. Every piece of evidence the team had carefully compiled was displayed clearly, professionally, and without emotion. Murmurs erupted across the room almost immediately. Ethan shot to his feet. What the hell is this? His voice cracked halfway through the sentence, the polished executive mask shattering in real time. I kept my tone even. This is the truth, Ethan, the one you thought no one would ever check. A forensic accountant stepped quietly onto the stage beside me while several attorneys moved toward key investor tables. More documents appeared on screen, emails where Ethan promised Whitmore backing he never had, private messages bragging about how he had everything under control. The room transformed from elegant gala to courtroom in under a minute. People who had laughed at his jokes minutes earlier now stared in quiet recognition. Investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One older gentleman who had done multiple deals with Ethan looked physically ill as he read the summaries. Ethan's face turned a deep red. "You set me up," he shouted toward the stage. "No," I replied softly, meeting his eyes across the distance. "You set yourself up the day you assumed I would stay silent." Then came the moment no one expected. Sophia stood slowly from her chair near the center of the room, every eye turned toward her. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice stayed remarkably steady. "He promised both of us a future he never actually owned," she said clearly, and I was foolish enough to believe him. That was all. She picked up her purse, gave me one small nod, and walked out of the ballroom alone. The sound of her heels on the marble echoed in the stunned silence. Ethan looked completely stunned, watching her leave. The woman he had chosen over me, over our twins, had just delivered the final blow in front of everyone who mattered in Dallas society. Security approached him moments later, quiet, professional, no dramatic scene. They spoke softly near his shoulder. Around the ballroom, people began turning away. Business partners who had shaken his hand earlier now avoided eye contact. The man who golfed with him every Sunday suddenly became very interested in his wine glass. Public humiliation in rooms like this rarely looks loud. It looks like isolation, like doors quietly closing one by one. As security guided Ethan toward the exit, he stopped briefly near our table. His eyes looked wild, desperate. "Please, Elena," he whispered, "don't destroy me." I met his gaze without flinching. "I didn't," I said softly. "You did." Without another word, he was escorted through the grand doors. In under 10 minutes, Ethan Cole disappeared from the world he had spent 21 years trying to conquer. I stepped down from the stage to polite but subdued applause. My father was waiting. He simply placed a hand on my shoulder. No big celebration, just quiet pride. In that moment, I felt lighter than I had in years, not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped losing myself. Hey friends, if you've ever been in a room where everyone finally saw the truth you had been carrying alone, you know the strange mix of relief and sadness that comes with it. It's not about destroying someone else, it's about finally refusing to let their lies define your worth. Type the word truth in the comments if you believe the calmest response can be the most powerful. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is simply stop protecting the man who never protected her. That night, as we drove back to the ranch under the vast Texas sky, I looked at my father and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace with the path ahead. 6 months after that night at the gala, I saw Ethan again in the most ordinary place possible, the Walmart parking lot outside Arlington. The brutal August Texas heat shimmered above the asphalt as I pushed the double stroller toward my car after a pediatric appointment. One of the twins had become obsessed with throwing pacifiers, and I had stopped to buy more. Life has a way of becoming beautifully ordinary again after the storm passes. Ethan stood near a gray pickup truck wearing faded jeans and a wrinkled polo shirt. He looked older, worn down in ways that expensive suits had once hidden. The confident posture was gone. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then walked over slowly. "Elena," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "You look well." I nodded. One twin babbled happily in the stroller while the other chewed on a rubber toy. "I'm sleeping more," I replied honestly. For a moment we just stood there under the hot sun, the silence between us no longer sharp with anger, but heavy with everything that had happened. The fallout from the gala had been swift but quiet. Investors pulled out, lawsuits were filed, business doors that once opened easily for Ethan Cole now remained firmly shut. By October he had lost his executive position. By November he was quietly blacklisted in Texas construction circles. Reputation, as my father always said, matters as much as money. Sophia had left before Thanksgiving. From what I heard, she moved to Arizona after realizing the depth of Ethan's debts. There were even rumors the baby might not be his, but by then it no longer brought me any satisfaction. I was too busy rebuilding. Early mornings on the ranch became my favorite time. Coffee in hand, watching sunlight spill across the horse pastures while the twins slept. Quiet conversations with my father at the kitchen table. Long walks pushing the double stroller beneath ancient oak trees. Therapy every Wednesday. Learning how to sit with myself without feeling abandoned. Healing wasn't loud or cinematic. It was showing up for the twins at 3 a.m. when they cried, making it through another day, and slowly remembering who I was before I spent 21 years trying to prove I didn't need my family's support. One October evening on the back porch, my father sat beside me as distant lightning flashed across the sky. "You still miss him sometimes," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sometimes I miss who I thought he was, I answered. He simply nodded, no judgment, just understanding. A few weeks later, I officially joined the Whitmore Foundation full-time, not as Richard Whitmore's daughter or Ethan Cole's ex-wife, but as Elena. We expanded programs for single mothers facing financial abuse and unstable housing. Some mornings I spent hours on the phone helping women find lawyers or emergency childcare. The work felt deeply personal now. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to choose yourself after 50, after children, after decades of putting everyone else first, let me tell you from the other side, it is never too late. That betrayal, as painful as it was, became the beginning of the life I was always meant to live, a life built on truth, quiet strength, and real love, starting with the love I finally gave myself. Hey friends, if you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own painful ending, I want you to hear this. You are not defined by who left you. You are defined by who you choose to become when no one is watching. The hardest endings often lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Type the word reborn in the comments if this story gave you hope. Share your own quiet strength. I read every single one. Thank you for sitting with me through this entire story. If it touched you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than their worst chapter. You've got this, and I'm rooting for you.